President-elect Bola Tinubu has discussed threatening U.S.-Nigeria relations in a phone conversation with U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. Blinken said, beg your pardon for that, he looks forward to strengthening U.S.-Nigeria partnership built on shared interest and strong people-to-people ties after Tinubu is sworn in as president. The two leaders also discussed the importance of inclusive leadership representing all Nigerians, continued cooperation in security, and reform supporting economic growth. But PDP presidential candidate Atiku Abubakar has criticized Blinken, saying in a tweet that Blinken's phone call is a contradiction to the publicly stated position of the U.S. on the presidential election. This is inconceivable considering that America, as a bastion of democracy, is well briefed on the sham election on February 25. To give legitimacy to the widely acknowledged fraudulent election in Nigeria can be demoralizing to citizens who have hedged their bet on democracy and the sanctity of the ballot. Also, the United States Secretary of State yesterday gave details, of the attack on the U.S. convoy in Anambra State on Tuesday. Blinken disclosed that 4 members of the advance party were killed, with the whereabouts of others still unknown. He said the motive for the attack was yet unknown, stressing that it may not be pre-targeted at the U.S. mission. The clarification came as President Muhammadu Buhari yesterday expressed his condolences on the killing of 2 United States Embassy officials and 2 Nigerian policemen, accompanied them by the gunmen in Ogbaru local government area of Anambra State. Let's talk about Ayo.
Yes, okay. Let me start with the first story in terms of Secretary Blinken calling the president-elect Bola Tinubu and the disappointment expressed by the presidential candidate of the PDP, Atiku Abubakar. Obviously, we all know that the PDP and Alhaji Atiku Abubakar have taken their matter to the Presidential Petitions Tribunal Court. It's currently in court, as well as the Labour Party and other parties who have also petitioned the court, challenging the outcome of the 2023 presidential election, of which Bola Tinubu emerged as winner. I believe that there's a lot of emphasis from Nigeria on the Western world. On one hand, we say that there shouldn't be interference from the Western world. In fact, famously, the President, Muhammadu Buhari, had said that the international community should not interfere with our local elections. On the other hand, we are almost hungry for validation from the Western world. And so it almost seems as if we're more content, or we look forward more to what America, in specific terms, says about our elections than what the people themselves say about the elections. We have a matter in court. We are looking to the judiciary to decide, having examined very closely the evidence before them as to whether the election was run properly by INEC, and also whether Bola Tinubu has legitimately won this election. Of course, in terms of international diplomacy, America is a superpower, and therefore, what they say matters. As it's jokingly said, America sneezes, the world catches cold. But we are also a sovereign. We are an independent nation, and we should, yes, look forward to what how the international community perceives this nation. But more importantly, we must take our own nation back in our hands. Alhaji Atiku Abubakar is well within his rights to release that tweet to challenge, because again, it sparks of hypocrisy, especially when the US themselves have said that the election was fraught with irregularities. But notwithstanding, let us focus on our own local issues and our courts and the voice of our own people, and not magnify the voices of external interference. And to the last point again, just to continue with my train of thought, when we lost our nationals, what a number of reports said was that, oh, thankfully no international life or no international person lost their lives. And then you begin to wonder, what is the value of the Nigerian life, whereby it is okay for Nigerian citizens, or not okay, but at least it's manageable, but let it not be an American citizen. We should value our people. I mean, the details of the report talks about the fact that it wasn't targeted at the American mission. Let us look at what's going on in that Ogbaru community. It's been fraught with violence, with attacks. Why must it be that until the convoy of the American embassy is shot at, that we begin to make it, we begin to look at it critically? So many things to talk about there.
Well, 2 quick issues here. The attack in Ogbaru local government area in Anambra State has been condemned by the president, by the governor of the state, by RIWA, by all kinds of interested groups. And the Americans have also spoken through Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State. And what Mr. Blinken has said is that, they do not have any evidence that this was a premeditated attack on the mission, and that no American life was lost, but persons died. 4 persons died. Some other persons, their whereabouts remain unknown. And the Americans have said they will work with the Nigerian government to find out what the motive is and to make sure that the persons that are missing are rescued. But in any case, the thing to note here is that any form of attack on anybody is unacceptable. And this is again an indication of the level of insecurity in the country, not just in the southeast. In the last 48 hours, there have also been reports of killings in Plateau State, in Benue State, in 2 places in Benue State. And in all of this, lives get lost. In the incident in Anambra State, 4 vehicles were set ablaze and all of that. However, the underlying thing here is also about diplomacy, which is why the statement by the Americans is important. The Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations of 1961, Article 29 thereof, talks about the responsibility of the state to protect. The receiving state has a responsibility to protect. Okay, for short, it's called R2P. So in this particular instance, the Nigerian government has a responsibility to make sure that diplomatic staff are protected. It's the same provision under Article 41 of the Vienna Convention on consular relations. So in one regard, diplomatic relations, 1961, consular relations, 1961. Article 41 in the Vienna Convention on consular relations talks about the inviolability of consular officers and agents. Article 34 talks about their right to freedom of movement. So this looks very untidy from the point of view of diplomacy. And what happens is that if our country is not safe, both citizens and others, working for embassies will suffer as a result. So it's most unfortunate. Now, as for Secretary of State Anthony Blinken calling the president-elect of Nigeria, everybody must note that it's not America that will determine who the president of Nigeria is. This is simply, within the province of friendly relations between 2 sovereign states. It's just diplomacy. And Nigerians having declared Bola Ahmed Tinubu as president-elect, and preparations have started for May 29 inauguration. It's not about the Americans dictating. The Nigerian people have already spoken. And what the Secretary of State is emphasizing is just diplomacy, continued partnership between Nigeria and the U.S. And he talked about Bola Ahmed Tinubu running an inclusive government, which is what we discussed yesterday, the president-elect talking about government of national unity and reaching across the aisle to other interested parties in the matter. So I do not see any problem with that. And the former vice president, presidential candidate of the PDP, having served as vice president, should know that this is diplomacy. It's not that the Americans are undermining Nigeria. And nobody should be surprised. On May 29, some of these heads of state and secretaries of state, they will show up at the inauguration because they want to identify with Nigeria, a strategic country, and they want Nigeria to be stable and for leadership to be provided. So these are the basic issues in this regard. The fact that the Americans have said, there is a visa ban list and all that, well, that has nothing to do with the decision that the Nigerian people have taken. And in any case, the last leg of that is in the courts. And, the courts would rule one way or the other. That has nothing to do with the Americans. So there's no interference here from a diplomatic point of view.
Wow. Okay. Real quickly, at first, please, let us stop this bastion of democracy cloak we give to America. Is it not the same America? January 6, Donald Trump, trying to scuttle election in broad daylight. And we also how the systems put in place failed. But the systems too also did rise up to the challenge. Because you had a vice president in Mike Pence that said, no, I'll stand up for democracy. So America has its own flawed problems. And it's always had its own problems. I mean, if you read Alexis de Tocqueville, Democracy in America, a book written close to about over 100 years ago, still talks about those problems. So nobody will point the way for any nation. And that's why we as a people must introspect. We must not wait on Western standards to tell us what to do. We too must have a system in place that disabuses politicians from rigging election and doing all sorts. That brings about integrity. These things are African values. All of a sudden, because our selfish interest is concerned, we don't want to have the African value. If you did something wrong in African traditional culture, there was always retribution for it. There was always retribution. In the Yoruba culture, it's called Esan. It's retribution. So let us have systems in place that bring about retribution for election offenders. Moving on to the call, there is no big deal as regards the call. America would align with anybody on ground to have diplomatic relations with Nigeria. As it is today, barring any legal encumbrances, Bola Ahmed Tinubu is president-elect, and he'll be sworn in May 29. And Americans need to have relationships. You might talk about the kind of relationships America have. Yes, I can engage you in a debate on that. But I say this was the same America that decided to have a relationship with Mobutu Sese Seko Kuku Ngenu was a banga, despite all he did to his people in Zaire. This was the same America that had a relationship with Samuel Doe. This was the same America that had a relationship with Jonas Savimbi. I can go on and on. But for the fact that you think that America will not have a relationship with Nigeria, they would. But it doesn't nullify the fact that there were irregularities in the elections, and that's why they've given out visa ban. And it doesn't nullify the fact that they will keep speaking up for democracy, even if democracy in their own backyard is problematic. But they will have to have a relationship because nature abhors a vacuum. The call is not an endorsement, please, of the elections. Because I see a lot of people try to spin it and say, because Anthony Blinken has called Bola Ahmed Tinubu, it's an endorsement of it. No. America, as we speak, is fighting a proxy war with Russia. But they still talk. They still have conversations as we speak. I remember when Russia was about to attack somewhere in the Middle East, they had to call Americans in advance and say, okay, get your troops out of there. We're about to attack the place. Yes, but they are not at peace. But they still talk. So it is not an endorsement of the election. Please, let us not twist things. They call for friendly relations. Bola Ahmed Tinubu is on ground, is president-elect. He will be the one to pick the call. Concerning the attacks, it just goes further to show the massive level of insecurity that pervades the air in Nigeria. The fact that President Muhammadu Buhari came to power in 2015, we had only Boko Haram insurgency, but now every area is inundated with strife and challenge and insecurity. In the east, to the north, to the west. So what legacy of security has he given Nigeria? I don't want to use the failure word, but if I say it, some people will get offended. But I will say it because it's failed as regards the electoral promises of providing security. And that's what we should introspect. So be it an American mission attacked or otherwise, we should introspect as regards the massive insecurity that is across board in Nigeria and how we can solve it and bring economic viability back. And this country can be truly great again.